Black Mirror, a show fairly accurately described to be the twilight zone of the modern day.
Black Mirror has emerged as a smartly critical anthology series about a not-so-distant dystopian future. Black Mirror has emerged as a smartly critical anthology series about a not-so-distant dystopian future. Black Mirror has emerged as a smartly critical anthology series about a not-so-distant critical anthology series. Black Mirror has emerged as a smartly critical anthology series about a not-so-distant
Whoa! What's up, fuckers? Welcome back to the show where I tell you what to think. I will be doing this entire video on the toilet because that's about how much respect I have for Black Mirror. Today I've got something really special for you. Today, we're gonna talk about Black Mirror. Exciting! This video is actually so important to me that I actually wrote a fucking script for it, which I never do. Why the fuck do people like this? Black Mirror is an anthology television series owned by Netflix and created by Charlie Brooker. As is stated on the show's Wikipedia page, it examines modern society, particularly with regard to the unanticipated consequences of new technologies. Black Mirror is a really strange cultural phenomenon. It's really fascinating to me because for some fucking reason, everyone loves it. It's bizarre. I'm usually in agreement with people about what shit's good and what shit isn't. I feel like I'm not that retarded, but Black Mirror and everyone liking it so much just makes me feel like I'm losing my mind sometimes. I've talked to a couple of people about Black Mirror in the past, and every time it's the same strange thing that happens. It's like they don't seem to notice any of the flaws until I point them out to them, and then they're like, oh, yeah, you know, that does seem like a plot hole. Yeah. It's like everyone turns off their brains before watching it. No one seems to be aware of just how much of a heaping pile of garbage this show is. It's bothered me so much to the point that every time someone mentions Black Mirror, I just get triggered. Which I guess is why I made this video. So the next time some retard tells me, oh, did you catch the last episode of Black Mirror? It was pretty good! Then I can just show them this video and tell them to fuck off. Anyway, here's the game plan, fuckheads. So what we're gonna do is look at some episodes that I picked out, discuss them thoroughly, and then draw some more general insight about the whole show from there. We're gonna look at 3 major episodes that I think embody the 3 major problems that I have with the Black Mirror TV show. Now, I could do an exhaustive review where I go through every single episode and dissect it as thoroughly as possible, but doing that would require me to rewatch every single episode of Black Mirror, probably more than once, and to be honest, I'd rather die. It was hard enough just to get myself to rewatch the 3 episodes that I picked out. Disclaimer! I will not be talking about Bandersnatch or any seasons beyond seasons 1 through 4. This is a discussion on Black Mirror seasons 1 through 4. I don't give a shit about the other stuff. So the first episode we're going to look at is USS Callister. It's been called the best episode in the 4th season, and I've seen a lot of people call it the best episode in the entire show. It won 4 Emmys, one of which is for the writing. Now, you're probably thinking, come on, this can't be that much of a pain. I mean, you're just going to rewatch a short episode. Maybe it's like 20 minutes, half an hour long, talk about it. Holy fuck, it's 76 minutes long. Let's look at Netflix's description of USS Callister. Captain Robert Daly presides over his crew with wisdom and courage, but a new recruit will soon discover nothing on this spaceship is what it seems. Great, that told us nothing. Thanks, Netflix. Let's read Wikipedia's description of the episode. The episode follows Robert Daly, a reclusive but gifted programmer and co-founder of a popular massive multiplayer online game who is bitter over the lack of recognition of his position from his co-workers. He takes out his frustrations by simulating a Star Trek-like space adventure within the game, using his coworkers' DNA to create sentient clones of them. Acting as the captain of the USS Callister starship, Daly is able to order his coworkers around, bend them to his will, and mistreat them if they get out of line. When Daly brings newly hired Nanette Cole into his game, she encourages the other clones to revolt against Daly. Now, if you're a Black Mirror fan, then you know that the writers aren't afraid to take a few liberties when it comes to originality. In fact, USS Callister is one of 6 episodes about artificial intelligence, one of 6 episodes about virtual or augmented reality, and it's even the 2nd episode about video games. If you had an IQ of 78, you might say, "But the sci-fi genre doesn't have a lot of material to work with. Can't blame them for running out of stuff to make episodes on." Okay. For a moment, let's assume that that's true. In that case, don't you think it would be their fault? If you were to create an anthology series, don't you think you'd want to not constrain yourself to a genre that runs out of material too quickly? Take a look at The Simpsons. That show existed solely to satirize the stereotypical 1980s family drama that was super popular at the time. But as soon as that stopped becoming relevant, the show went to utter shit. This brings me to my other point, which is that that's just not true. The sci-fi genre is one of the most expansive genres in all of entertainment. People have been writing sci-fi novels for the past, 100 years, and they're not gonna stop anytime soon. Let's just get into the episode. Maybe it's not that bad. So it opens with this obvious imitation of Star Trek, and I'm calling it an imitation, not an homage, because that's what it is. And it's really obvious that they just filmed it using modern equipment, and then they slapped this terrible-looking, old-timey filter over it. I don't really get why they did that in this scene. The scene takes place in the future, so it wouldn't make sense for that kind of camera artifact to exist, and it's clearly not a part of whatever game they're playing, because they never use it again in the episode at all. The only reason I can think of is that they wanted to make a reference to the original Star Trek episodes, and the only thing they came up with is this lazy, pointless visual effect that has no place in the story and is never used again. Okay, next scene is the dude from the previous scene, except this time he looks like a stereotype of an antisocial nerd, and he's waiting in an elevator with people who look like they stopped by a funeral on their way to work. I'm gonna play a couple seconds from this scene, and you just see if you can figure out what the director is trying to do.
13th floor. Welcome to Callister.
Excuse me. Excuse me.
Did you happen to catch the part where everyone around him acts like an inconsiderate asshole? I hope so, because it's really fucking obvious. It's pretty clear that this character is supposed to be some sort of unpopular, not so well-liked loner type guy, but did they have to make it so fucking unsubtle? Look, this bitch doesn't even move until he taps her on the shoulder. Why are they all such assholes? And why is it so coordinated? In real life, at least one person would probably be like, "Hey, guys, can you move out of the way? He said it was his stop." But no, literally no one moves until he has to force his way out of the elevator. Okay, we're gonna see a lot of this in this episode, where the director wants you to pick up on something or feel a certain way about this character, but instead of writing clever scenes where that information is conveyed to you in a way that doesn't insult your intelligence, they just clobber you over the head with scenes that are so basic and ham-fisted you'd think a 3rd grader wrote them. Next, he walks up to the front desk of Callister Inc., which is evidently the company he works at, and he has trouble swiping in with his ID or whatever, and instead of actually being helpful, the lady at the desk acts like a flaming cunt and doesn't even get off her phone to help him because he's obviously very unpopular and a loser and is not valued at his job. Do you get it?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bitch! Why don't you get off Tinder and do your fucking job? Next, he walks onto the main floor and there's an incredibly awkward exchange between him and this dude. Our guy asks for coffee in perhaps the most uncomfortable way possible.
Are you making coffees?
Yeah.
Do you think maybe you could make me one too?
And the guy he's talking to even makes a joke about him being overweight.
Skim milk.
Yeah, good call.
You asshole! After that nightmare of an interaction, he walks across the office floor, gets distracted when a woman on the phone walks right through him without greeting him or acknowledging that he is there in any way.
Oh, are you okay, man? I guess you didn't see my gym bag.
Yeah, he trips over this dude's gym bag because he is a beta cuck. And this dude is a huge fucking alpha because he has a gym bag because he goes to the gym. And this guy tripped over it because he is an out-of-shape loser. Do you get it? He finally makes it across the floor to his office where we learn that his name is Robert Daly and he's the fucking CTO of the company? Not only that, but as we'll soon find out, he co-founded the company. Why the fuck is everyone such an asshole to him when he is the reason they are employed? In real life, if you were that much of an asshole to your supervisor, you would get fired on the spot, no matter how timid they were. Have some fucking respect for the person who is allowing you to be alive. Wow, look at the people literally staring and laughing at him. So then this girl named Nanette, who was supposed to be just like a new hire or something, just barges into his office.
Oh, the ladies' bathroom is that way. That sign's kind of confusing.
Wait, what the actual fuck? What? How the fuck is that sign confusing? Is he talking about his sign? It looks nothing like the sign for the ladies' room. What? Apparently, she's a huge fan of his work because, did I forget to mention, he created the game the company is founded on?
Hi. I'm Nanette Cole. I started here today. Coding on the procedural algorithm is amazing. It's just some beautiful code.
You must be busy. I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine.
Sorry.
No.
Well, just fangirling. Sorry.
This is where we find out that the show that Daly is obsessed with that's totally not Star Trek is called Space Fleet.
Space Fleet. Wow. It's a TV show.
Nice buzzwords, buddy. How long did you spend writing this script? Like 20 minutes? So then this guy who we saw in the first scene comes in, and it turns out he's the CEO, and he and Daly co-founded the company together.
I'm James Walton. I run the company. Well, we run the company, kind of. Bob here is the hardware, and I am the shiny front end.
Do you get it? He explains to Daly that the Infinity update, which is apparently an upcoming big update to the game, needs to be completed before the weekend because customers are all over his balls.
All over our balls.
Not busting his balls, all over his balls.
All over our balls.
Kind of a weird expression, but then again, this show is British, and the British are known for their weird expression.
You know, what happened to fucking girl power? Zig zig ah.
Then he offers to give the new recruit the tour.
Have you had the tour?
And they leave.
It was so nice to meet you.
Is that fucking binary running down his monitor like fucking Hacker Man? Is that what they think coding looks like? Who approved the decision to have that in the shot? Daly goes up to this dude, Kabir, who is apparently the only one who knows anything about this huge update that seems really important, because Daly just asks him,
when is the update though?
Do you have the latest ETA on the update patch?
Kabir explains to Daly that they're running into problems, but if they could have 10 more days, they can fix all the errors and make other improvements. But Daly is too busy staring at the only female who's ever been nice to him, and he says,
Yeah, whatever, I don't care, just do it.
Yeah, do all that.
After work, Daly goes home to his futuristic apartment from the future. You can tell it's from the future because his front door looks like an iPad. Yo, his apartment is surprisingly clean for an unpopular beta nerd who's out of shape and has never seen a girl before. Doesn't even look lived in. His bedroom looks more like a gift shop. Also, what the fuck are these tiny screens doing for his setup? Does he need 12 iPad-sized displays in addition to the huge one he already has? He sits down at his desktop and grabs himself a chocolate milk because he's a nerd. Do you get it? He puts a fridge magnet on his forehead and opens up a special Space Fleet version of the game, which we can assume was what we saw in the first scene. Now, as we're about to find out, this modded version of the game is pretty fucking scandalous. So why the fuck would he keep the folder containing it just on his desktop by itself? I feel like when most people have something controversial, like porn, they fucking bury that shit in like 100 folders. What if he lets a friend use his computer? Also, I love the idiotic simplicity of this. He's got a folder on a desktop that is remarkably clean for a computer programmer. I don't even do shit on my computer and it's fucking cluttered as fuck. Why the fuck do I have all this shit? The folder's just called Infinity, and inside he's got
the normal version and the special version.
It's pretty obvious that no one who helped make this episode has ever downloaded a video game. It's never just the exe file. There's almost always a whole folder of supporting files and other shit that helps it run. He enters the game, except this time he's a huge asshole for some reason, even though he wasn't at all like that in the first Space Fleet scene. It's really over the top and stupid, and you can tell the director was just trying as hard as he could to get you to believe that because Daly is mistreated, he's become a monster internally, and he only expresses it in the game. By making him not an asshole in one scene and then an asshole in the other scene, they're trying to create the illusion that there's some sort of plot progression going on. There's not. Nothing is happening. The writers just decided that it would be more convenient for the plot if they first show Daly as he actually is in this scene, even though it doesn't make any sense. So then it's the next day at work. Are those AirPods? What year did this come out? Charlie Brooker, man, your legal team needs to get its shit together and look into this. The CEO shamelessly flirts with the new recruit as Daly watches from his office window. Kabir comes in to tell him that because of the new shit that he just approved without fucking paying attention, the update won't be finished until Christmas Eve. Nanette asks Daly if he wants coffee, and he accepts in the most awkward way possible.
I was just gonna fix a coffee. Do you want one?
Sure.
Nanette has an incredibly badly written conversation with this person where she simultaneously praises the CEO for being a fuckboy and denigrates Daly for being creepy because he sometimes looks at female employees a little too long.
He's a really good guy. He's a bit of a player. Chuck a ham sandwich across the room, he'll fuck it before it hits the ground, but he's basically an alright bloke.
Okay.
Don't be too nice to him because he gets a bit stary. Wide berth. That's my advice. Wide berth.
Okay.
So now the possibility of Daly being hated at the office because he's creepy, which would have been a perfectly good excuse for everyone's behavior, is completely invalidated because, as we've seen, the CEO is even worse. And not only that, the employees know, but they don't care because he's a stand-up guy, and Daly isn't because he's an unattractive nerd.
He's coding this.
Seriously, if you haven't seen Black Mirror, I highly recommend just watching this conversation in its entirety. It will make you angry how stupid it is. For the cherry on top, Nanette explains that she admires Daly for his work, and she responds as any 7th grader would by accusing Nanette of being attracted to Daly. Nanette refutes this so hard that Daly overhears and decides right then and there that she's going straight in the sex dungeon. I mean, modded version of the game. Daly collects some of her DNA from her coffee cup and brings it to his 3D printer? And all he has to do is insert the swab of DNA and it makes a replica of Nanette as an AI in the Space Fleet mod of the game. That seems incredibly useful for, I don't know, the military? Does he just have this shit in his house? In the next scene, the AI version of Nanette wakes up in the game. Now, this is gonna come as a little bit of a shocker, but I actually like this scene. I like that it's shot entirely from Nanette's perspective, and Nanette's reaction when she's told that she's an AI copy of herself stuck inside Daly's game is pretty convincing. The acting is what sells this scene for me. Granted, it's not perfect.
What's your poison? Some of this actually is poison, so don't be shy.
Why would you keep actual poison in a bar where people might drink it? I explained to Nanette that each of them is an exact digital copy of their real self, complete with all their original memories, and that Daly put them there by stealing their DNA because each of them pissed him off in some way. I have a question. How were her memories extracted from a random... How were her memories extracted from her DNA? I knew this episode took place in the future, but I didn't know it was so far in the future that humans have evolved to store memories in their DNA instead of their brain. That's not how DNA works. Question 2. Why are they able to interact even when Daly isn't in the game? Most people close out a game when they're finished playing. Daly's mod is offline, so when he closes the game, everything should shut down. Does he just leave it running on his computer all the time? That seems wasteful. Not to mention stupid. Why would he give them the opportunity to communicate and potentially plan a revolt when he's not there? Was it just impossible to fathom that the AIs that he was keeping as slaves might be fed up with the situation they're in? Really? For a so-called genius, he's starting to seem pretty fucking stupid. Soon, Daly enters the game, but Nanette won't play along, so Daly morphs her face at will just by doing some shit with his hands. This, and the fact that it is mentioned multiple times that Daly is invincible and is in control of everything, communicates that while Daly is in the game, he is effectively a god. This is important and it will come up later. Nanette gets her shit together, and there's a funny little moment where Nanette realizes how silly the whole Space Fleet thing is when this lady tells her that all the buttons on the ship do the same thing.
Any button. They're all the same.
Breathable atmosphere.
Why would you bother to say that when you're not even wearing a spacesuit? Are you retarded? It's been very obvious from the beginning that all the space fleet scenes are a reference to Star Trek. I hesitate to call it an illusion because of how obvious it is. It's more like a reference. I don't understand why they didn't just get the permission to actually call it Star Trek. Changing the name of the show doesn't make your reference any cleverer if everything else is the same. The space fleet scenes are honestly kind of hard to watch because of how cringy they are, but I think that's intentional. I think the point was that Daly's impression of Star Trek is different from real Star Trek because it reflects his immaturity and the extent of his god complex, which is fine. Also, one nitpicky thing that bothered me was that in all of these space fleet scenes, they're clearly trying to imitate the aesthetic of old Star Trek with the sets and the clothing, but then they just have this terrible CGI monster that looks like it belongs in the 90s and doesn't fit at all in a Star Trek episode. In an actual episode of Star Trek, they would have used a practical effect or a puppet, but I guess that was too hard, so they just used this lazy CGI monster instead. Daly finishes his space fleet bullshit and exits the game. Then the rest of the crew reveal to Nanette that Daly has removed every option for pleasure from their bodies, including genitalia, which leads to possibly the worst line of dialogue in the entire episode.
Stealing my pussy is a red fucking line.
Who wrote this?
So they decide to rebel. Earlier in the scene, Daly pauses the game because his home system alerted him that he had a pizza delivery, which revealed that his mod is connected to his home system. The plan they come up with is to hack into Daly's home system through the game and connect to the internet so that they can invite the real Nanette into the game so that she can help them. Nanette does this successfully and manages to hack into a game menu where you can invite players. Question, didn't all the buttons do the same thing? Or was that only for these buttons and all the other ones actually do stuff? Or do the buttons only all do the same thing when Daly is in-game and then when he leaves, they just revert back to actually being useful? Also, why would Daly allow for access into his home system from within the game when he's not there? Did he just not realize that was possible? So much for being a tech genius. Not to mention, this entire scenario could have been avoided if he just shut his fucking game off when he finished. Regardless of all those loose ends, it works, and Nanette sends an invite to real-life Nanette. The next day, real-life Nanette walks into work and receives the invite. She's like, "Did you invite me to join your weird game?" And he's like, no, it's probably spam, dude, just ignore it. Daly goes into his office and enters the game so that he can find out who goofed. Nanette confesses, and Daly is about to turn him into a bad CGI monster, but the other lady steps in front of him, so he turns her into a bad CGI monster instead. After he leaves, Nanette is running through the ship when she sees a vortex in space, which she concludes is the game's representation of the update, which means they're still somehow connected to the internet. She explains to the crew that if they can fly through the wormhole, the game's firewall will destroy them and they'll effectively be free. Even excluding the fact that that's not at all what a firewall does, the concept that an update can be represented by something physical in a game is fucking ridiculous. When an online game is updated, the server is taken down, which means the game will stop running, the update is implemented, and then the server is put back up. Even offline games have to be restarted before an update will take effect. Keep in mind, it's not a crime for technology to do something impossible in science fiction. What is a crime is for the magic of technology to be used as a substitute for good writing. Instead of the characters coming up with a creative or interesting way to escape their situation, they can just fly into the vortex and it fixes everything for them. I would have been more interested in seeing them try more things like when they contacted a real-life Nanette from inside the game. Everyone is on board with the plan except CEO Guy, who explains that even if they succeed, Daly will just re-upload them because he keeps all of their DNA samples in a mini fridge in his room. Nanette's solution is to blackmail her real self into breaking into Daly's home to destroy the DNA samples. But couldn't Daly just collect more samples? He did it pretty effortlessly the first time.
What should we do?
Is that just a normal fucking keyboard glued to the control panel?
Who was in charge of set design?
Daly arrives home and enters the game, where the crew greet him with an enthusiasm that is so obviously hiding something that you'd have to be an idiot not to be suspicious. Nanette convinces him to go with her alone to some planet where she does the most transparent tease ever to get Daly to take off his clothes and go swimming with her. The crew that are still on the ship use Daly's thingy that connects him to his home system to gain access to the scandalous photos that they'll use to blackmail real-life Nanette. They call real-life Nanette from inside the game using Daly's thingy and blackmail her. So, she breaks into Daly's apartment by ordering him pizza. I guess a pizza delivery is the only thing the writers could think of that causes doorbells to ring.
Pause game.
Why would the pause command only pause him? That seems like a terrible design. Did anyone stop to think how retarded that is? While Daly is paused, they beam Nanette back up to the ship and start racing towards the vortex. Daly unpauses and realizes that something's up, so he gets in his transport ship. By the way, if they had the ability to beam to and from the ship without using a transport ship, then why did they take a smaller ship? If they just beamed there in the first place, then they could have actually left him stranded on the planet. Anyway, he chases after them, and there's some fake tension as the crew flies through an asteroid field, but CEO Guy sacrifices himself to fix the game, and they make it through the vortex right as it closes. The crew emerge on the other side, and they're surprised when they're not dead. They realize they're in the actual online version of the game now, and the update only affected Daly's code, not the AIs themselves. They deduce that Daly is stuck in his modded game, and that the firewall removed his code and disabled his controls, so he is unable to exit the game and his ship is useless. The firewall then apparently detects his mod as a rogue universe, even though he's been connected to the internet for much longer than this, and it proceeds to delete the universe so that Daly is stuck in some sort of cyber coma. This ending, and I cannot stress this enough, makes absolutely no sense! Let's start with the biggest elephant in the room, which is, do you know what a fucking firewall is? Firewall, a part of a computer system or network which is designed to block unauthorized access while permitting outward communication. Firewalls stop unwanted traffic on a specific network. They can't delete code, they can't alter a program or file, and they have nothing to do with updating a video game. A firewall is attached to a network, not a server or a system file. Whoever wrote this just used the word firewall because they recognize it as a term that they'd heard before, and not a single person decided to check and see if it was correct. How did they figure out that the vortex was part of the update? The vortex clearly isn't a normal part of the update process, because otherwise that would be a huge fucking liability, and they would either have excessive warning systems in place, or they would just eject each player from the game right before an update so that no one dies. Either way, Daly, who is the fucking creator of this game, would know about the update vortexes, and he would know to get the fuck out of there as soon as he sees one. So how did Nanette know? Did she just guess? Let's examine the sheer absurdity of this update vortex. The crew make it very clear that rogue universes within the game are very rare. So you're telling me that when a rogue universe receives an update, it just happens to manifest as a vortex within the game that can transport you from the rogue universe to the real one? Not only that, but it remains open during the update and does absolutely nothing to the rogue universe. But after the update ends, the portal closes and disables the player's controls and does nothing else. Then later on, the firewall just happens to detect the rogue universe and deletes it. How did Daly let this happen at all? He demonstrates that he can physically manipulate the crew at will whenever he wants, and the crew specifically mention numerous times that he is invincible and in control of everything. He's basically a god in the game. Why didn't he just will his spaceship to go faster, or make their spaceship explode, or literally any other scenario? Maybe Daly's god morphing powers only work on people, and they can't work on the rest of the surroundings of the game. Well, very, very stupid on Daly's part, that's acceptable to me. But he still has several other obvious solutions. Every time Daly re-enters the game, he always starts on the ship. Why didn't he just exit the game and then re-enter so that he would be on the ship again, and then he could fuck up their plan? Maybe he can only re-enter the game from the last place he exited. We only ever see him exit the game while he's on the ship, so it's possible. In that case, just exit the game and reboot it. Or delete it. It's like Daly conveniently forgot that he had all these options because the plot requires him to. Anyway, the crew celebrate being free of Daly's wrath, and Nanette concludes the episode with another signature line.
Stick us in hyperwarp and let's fuck off somewhere.
I want to end my life. There is a lot wrong with this episode, but the reason that I picked it is because it exemplifies the first problem with Black Mirror. Lazy writing. The writing is lazy. We saw this in two forms, the first of which is the way that Daly was shown to be unpopular. There is a clever way to make a character seem like he's not well liked. Subtle behaviors by people around him, small details about his interactions with others, maybe a confrontation, but the writers couldn't figure out how to do that. So instead, they have each character tell you that Daly is unpopular, either by literally saying it out loud, or by behaving in ways that no normal human being would behave. There is a saying in cinema, show, don't tell. These guys clearly haven't heard of it. The second example of laziness is the way that technology is used in this episode. Instead of using the concepts of artificial intelligence and immersive virtual reality to creatively tell a story, the writers just used technology as a black box into which they shat a couple plot points and out of which came the story. Every time the plot needs to move forward, there's an arbitrary and contrived technological concept that's ready to do it. These problems are featured extensively throughout the episodes of Black Mirror. With a couple of exceptions, pretty much every episode is written this lazily. Everything is told to you instead of shown, and the story is told to you by a technology that only exists to connect dots. This episode didn't have to be a disaster. AI, VR, god complexes, and male abuse of power are all interesting concepts. It just seems like the writers came up with a couple good ideas and then handed them off to a 6th grader who could write the script for them. You might be surprised to know that the creator of Black Mirror is a comedian, because there are a lot of terrible jokes in this episode.
Over there! A naked lady! Really?
Fucking kill me! Anyway, that was the first episode. Goodbye and fuck you.
Bruh.